looking to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles. You're watching ASEAN in Focus. On today's headlines. Indonesia's government called on the country's police to identify and punish whoever was responsible for a stadium stampede that left at least 125 people dead as anger mounted over one of the deadliest disasters in the history of football. President Marcos Jr. and the Department of Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista led the groundbreaking rites for the construction of the Ortigas and Shaw Boulevard stations of the Metro Manila Subway project. President Marcos Jr. also returned to Singapore over the weekend to reinforce talks during his recent state visit there and encourage new investments in the country. And U.S. President Joe Biden sent his gratitude to the Filipino-American community in celebration of the Filipino-American History Month this October. First in our news, Indonesian police came under mounting criticism after at least 125 people died in a stampede at a football stadium where officers fired tear gas on angry fans invading the pitch. The tragedy on Saturday night in the city of Malang, which also left 323 injured according to police, was one of the world's deadliest sporting stadium disasters. President Joko Widodo ordered an investigation into the tragedy.
Saya juga telah perintahkan kepada Menpora, Kapolri, dan Ketua Umum PSSI untuk melakukan evaluasi menyeluruh tentang pelaksanaan pertandingan sepak bola dan juga prosedur pengamanan penyelenggaraannya.
Permasalahan terjadi pada saat telah selesai, terjadi kekecewaan dari para penonton yang melihat tim kesayangannya yang tidak pernah kalah. Selama 23 tahun bertanding di kandang sendiri, tidak pernah kalah, namun pada malam ini mengalami kekalahan. Rasa kekecewaan itulah yang menggerakkan para penonton turun ke tengah lapangan dan berusaha mencari para pemain dan ofisial.
Arema FC supporters at the Kanjuruhan Stadium stormed the pitch after their team lost 3-2 to the visiting team and bitter rivals. Police, who described the unrest as riots, said they tried to force fans to return to the stands and fired tear gas after 2 officers were killed. Many of the victims were trampled or choked to death. Arema football coach Javier Roca on Sunday said that fans had even died in the arms of players after some of the team stayed on the pitch when the game ended. A hospital director told local TV that one of the victims was 5 years old. Video footage circulating on social media showed people shouting obscenities at police who were holding riot shields and wielding batons. Images taken from inside the stadium during the stampede additionally showed police firing huge amounts of tear gas and people clamoring over fences. Amnesty International called for an investigation into why tear gas was deployed in a confined space, saying it should only be used when other methods have failed. Fan violence is an enduring problem in Indonesia, where deep rivalries have previously turned into deadly confrontations. Arema FC and Persebaya Surabaya are longtime rivals. Persebaya Surabaya fans were not allowed to buy tickets for the game due to fears of violence. However, Indonesia's coordinating minister for political, legal, and security affairs, Mahfud MD, said organizers ignored a recommendation to print fewer tickets and hold the match in the afternoon instead of the evening. Meanwhile, the football world mourned the disaster with Gianni Infantino, president of World Food Football governing body FIFA, calling the stampede a tragedy beyond comprehension. Fans died in the arms of players. I am mentally shattered. I feel a heavy burden, even a heavy responsibility. That according to Javier Roca, the coach of the Arima FC, the Indonesian team whose game against Persebaya Surabaya was the scene of the tragedy. The thoughts of everyone at the Premier League are with those affected by the tragic events at Kanjuruhan Stadium last night. That according to the English Premier League. Heartbreaking, our thoughts are with the victims and their families. That according to Spain defender Sergio Ramos. We are deeply saddened to hear of the tragic events at the Kanjuruhan Stadium in Indonesia. Our thoughts are all with those affected, according to Manchester City. My thoughts are with the families and friends of the victims of the terrible stampede in a football stadium in Indonesia, according to IOC President Thomas Bach. My deepest sympathy goes out to those affected and their families and all citizens of Indonesia. That according to Germany, Germany stands by their side, that according to German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. The Asian Football Confederation, as well as the German Football Association and Italy's Serie A, all expressed their regret. Meanwhile, hundreds of people are receiving treatment at the Kanjuruhan Kepanjan Hospital after the deadly stampede that took place at the football stadium in Indonesia. Let's listen in.
Gak pengen lagi. Ya, wis nonton di TV aja gak apa-apa, sama aja.
Yang gotong dari supporter lain, ada yang gotong, saya lihat celananya, loh kok ini Mbak Ipar tuh, tak lihat ternyata benar. Terus otomatis saya penasaran suaminya tak lihat lagi, ada yang bokong, loh dibokong supporter, ditaruh juga di ini, tak lihat mas saya bilang gitu, terus saya pindahin. Jadi hampir lebih di 1 jaman itu.
Now, many of the victims were trampled or choked to death, police said, in what is one of the worst disasters in sporting history. A domino effect of tragic events unfolded after the final whistle in a 3-2 win for visiting team Persebaya Surabaya, the bitter rivals of Malang City's Arema FC. Several thousand fans descended to the pitch. Some were angry, some who wanted to join the crowd to shake the hands of players for home team Arema FC after the loss to their fierce rivals. With horns blaring and obscenity shouted at the police from the crowd, they watched as their fellow fans ran across the grass. But the police tried to force fans back into the confined stands, pushing them with their batons and riot shields. Panic set in as the canisters rained down, causing hundreds to rush for the exit points. And those who managed to get out emerged carrying lifeless bodies out of the stadium, inciting fury among the escaped spectators. They then unleashed a hail of their tear gas on the terraces in front of the stadium's exit gates 12 and 13. Meanwhile, Indonesia's government is calling on the country's police today to identify and punish whoever was responsible for the stadium stampede that left at least 125 people dead. Anger is mounting over one of the deadliest disasters in the history of football. Indonesia's Chief Security Minister Mahfud MD said in a broadcast statement, without specifying who he was referring to, quote, "We asked them to unveil who has perpetrated the crimes and that action must be taken against them, and we also hope the National Police will evaluate their security procedures." He said authorities would announce the results of the probe as soon as possible. The tragedy on Saturday night in the city of Malang also injured more than 300 people after officers fired tear gas in the packed stadium to quell the pitch invasion, triggering a stampede. Witnesses of Saturday's violence say fans of the home team Arema invaded the pitch after their loss to Persebaya Surabaya. Staying in Indonesia, a 5.9 magnitude earthquake hit Indonesia's Sumatra Island early on Saturday. According to the USGS, it killed 1 person and injured dozens as locals rushed out of buildings seeking safety. The quake hit at a relatively low, shallow depth of 13 kilometers just before 2:30 a.m. local time, about 40 kilometers from the town of Sibolga in North Sumatra province, according to the USGS. A regional disaster mitigation agency official said a man in his 50s died from a heart attack triggered by the quake, and at least 25 other people were injured. Authorities are still gathering reports on damage, but electricity poles and telecommunication towers have been hit, knocking out services. More than 50 aftershocks were recorded by the Indonesian Meteorological and Geophysics Agency. Officials advised residents to watch for further tremors, and they urged people to seek shelter on safe ground. In tonight's other news, President Marcos Jr. and the Department of Transportation Chief Jaime Bautista led the groundbreaking rites for the construction of the Ortigas and Shaw Boulevard stations of the Metro Manila Subway project today. Let's listen in.
Today's groundbreaking is such a good indicator that our infrastructure cooperation is gaining much momentum under the President Marcos administration's Build Better, More policies. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to the President Marcos and Secretary Bautista for dedicated effort and strong leadership. The Metro Manila Subway, as a project of the century, as my colleague Sakamoto said, is very much in line with Japan's aim to support the Philippines' upper middle income goal and post-pandemic recovery. This firm commitment was reiterated by no less than the Prime Minister Kishida, in his recent meeting with His Excellency President Marcos in New York. It will enhance connectivity in Metro Manila by reducing travel time between Quezon City and Naya Terminal 3 and create around 60,000 jobs. With the Philippines economy now on track to full recovery, I'm hopeful this project would help advance the country's path to pre-pandemic growth levels and even greater.
We expect the subway to be operational by 2028. We are most grateful to the Japan International Cooperation Agency for their funding support to this and other projects of the Department of Transportation. The subway will not only provide comfort and convenience, but also generate jobs. It will also be safe, affordable, and accessible.
We look forward that this project will benefit the approximately 150,000 passengers a day by the year 2028. To everyone's knowledge, the CP-104 is part of the 33-kilometer Metro Manila Subway Project Phase 1, the first subway project in the Philippines. Once operational, the MMSP Phase 1 will reduce travel time between Quezon City and the Manila Airport from 1 hour and 30 minutes to 35 minutes. As we break the ground for this portion of our subway system, we fervently hope to soon enjoy the benefits that it brings to the general public, with accessible designated stations that can cater to a massive volume of passengers. We anticipate helping our people skip the long lines of traffic and even spare themselves from the perils of commuting. With the improved linkages of key areas and business districts in the metro, as well as the availability of stalls and other stores in the stations and nearby markets, we can see more business opportunities for entrepreneurs and investors and additional economic activity. As our people gain more time by cutting long hours of travel, they can now engage in more worthwhile and productive endeavors, making time for greater self-improvement, or, equally important, spending quality time with their families.
Once operational, the subway can accommodate more than 370,000 passengers a day and will reduce travel time from Valenzuela to Bicutan to just 45 minutes. The groundbreaking ceremony had the closure of a portion of Meralco Avenue in Pasig City from Capitol Commons to Shaw Boulevard, where traffic will be rerouted starting this month until 2028 to give way for the construction. The tunnel to connect the two stations will be nearly 3.4 kilometers long, and the tunnel will be formed using two huge tunnel boring machines, or TBM, from Japan, using a technique called the New Austrian Tunneling Method, or NATM. Each TBM to be used in the project can excavate 300 to 500 cubic meters of soil daily and creates a tunnel 12 to 30 meters long daily, using rotating cutting wheels that can easily break up hard soil and rocks. While the massive TBMs can significantly hasten the process of tunneling, above ground disruption will be kept to the minimum. Meanwhile, President Bongbong Marcos Jr. also today said his administration is eyeing to pursue grander and more ambitious infrastructure projects to create jobs, improve connectivity, and provide convenience to commuters. Marcos made this remark during the groundbreaking rites for the construction of the Ortigas and Shaw Boulevard stations of the Metro Manila Subway project at the Metro Walk Commercial Complex in Pasig today. Take a look.
Let the breaking ground of this subway system signal our intention to the world to pursue even grander dreams and more ambitious endeavors that will bring comfort and progress to our people all over the country. Be assured that this administration will take the lead in identifying, pursuing, and implementing projects as part of the Build Better, More Infrastructure agenda that we have laid out. With this serving as our guide moving forward, that our shared aspirations for a better, brighter, and more prosperous Philippines enkindle in all of us Filipinos a renewed zeal and purpose to work for the advancement of our countrymen.
President Bongbong Marcos Jr. also returned to Singapore over the weekend to reinforce talks during his recent state visit there and encourage anew investments in the country. Press Secretary Trixie Cruz Angeles, in her official Facebook page, shared a screenshot of a post made by Singaporean Manpower Minister Tan See Leng confirming Marcos's trip to the city-state. President Marcos met with Singaporean investors on the sidelines of the Formula One Grand Prix race on Sunday night. Joining President Marcos were his son, Senior Deputy Majority Leader, and Ilocos Norte 1st District Representative Sandro Marcos, and his cousin, House Speaker Martin Romualdez. Mr. Tan, on his Facebook post, said he met other heads of state, ministers, and foreign dignitaries apart from President Marcos. During his first state visit to Singapore from September 6 and 7, President Marcos brought home $6.54 billion in investment pledges. The commitments, expected to generate jobs for 15,000 people, include $5 billion investment in electric tricycles. A Thai constitutional court ruled that Thai Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha can resume office as he hasn't exceeded his 8-year term limit. Take a look.
อาศัยเหตุผลดังกล่าวข้างต้นศาลรัฐธรรมนูญโดยมติเสียงข้างมากจึงวินิจฉัยว่าการเป็นรัฐมนตรีของนายกรัฐมนตรีผู้ถูกร้องไม่สิ้นสุดลงตามรัฐธรรมนูญแห่งราชอาณาจักรไทยพุทธศักราช 2560 ตามมาตรา 1
The former army chief who came to power in a 2014 military coup was suspended last month while the court examined a legal challenge mounted by opposition parties who argued he had reached his term limit in power. Bangkok authorities were on alert for demonstrations after the ruling, as several protest groups had earlier said they would take to the streets if Mr. Prayut won the case. Under the 2017 Thai constitution, a prime minister cannot serve more than 8 years in office, but But Prayut's supporters and critics disagreed about when his term began. The ruling counts Prayut's term from when the new army scripted constitution came into force and means he can stay in office until 2025, depending on an upcoming national poll, which must be held within months. Mr. Prayut welcomed the 6-3 majority ruling. In a statement on his official Facebook page, he said he would use the government's remaining time in office to push ahead with infrastructure projects. And Bangkok's infamous number 8 route buses, or Pink Devils, as locals call them, are often seen roaring down the busy streets in the Thai capital, furiously undertaking tuk-tuks, cars, and motorbikes, narrowly avoiding collisions. But a succession of high-profile number 8 deaths in recent years brought calls for reform, and now new firms are overhauling the system, promising an improved service and replacing the hot buses with electric vehicles. Take a look.
คือมันต้องแข่งกันครับ เล็กอย่างเรากินเปอร์เซ็นต์เนี่ยมันก็ต้องแข่งกันไปเพื่อเอารอบวันหนึ่งเราต้องวิ่งให้ได้4 รอบเงินมันถึงจะเหลือกินเหลือใช้ครับ
คือมีทุกสายเขาต้องแข่งกันทุกสายมันไม่มีใครที่จะวิ่งตามกันทั้งวันหรอกครับพี่ใช่ไหมอย่างพี่หากินออกไปหากินคือ1ต้องหาเงินเข้าบ้านไหมเงินคนละกระเป๋าพี่ได้เยอะผมไม่ได้พี่เลี้ยงผมไหมพี่ก็ไม่ได้เลี้ยงผมใช่ไหมครับก็คือเขาก็ต้องมีแข่งแต่เขาก็ไม่ได้แบบน่ากลัวอะไรปาดกันขนาดนั้น
ประสบอุบัติเหตุการรถสาย8 ครั้งนะครับตอนนั้นตอนเลิกงานตอนเช้าครับแล้วก็มือเนี้ยมันจะเกี่ยวกับข้างบนที่ราวที่จับรถบัสนะครับ
In other news, Vietnam's economy grew more than 13% in the third quarter compared to a year earlier, as manufacturing and exports surged following the end of strict COVID-19 controls, according to authorities. During the same period last year, commercial hub Ho Chi Minh City was under strict lockdown, and production at many factories in important southern industrial zones was severely affected. Take a look. Growth in the communist nation and manufacturing powerhouse stuttered at around 3% for 2 consecutive years due to the pandemic. And before that, Vietnam was a success story among Asian economies, posting growth of 7% back in 2019. In a return to health, the economy grew by 18.83% in the first 9 months of this year, the fastest expansion since 2011. According to a World Bank report last month, Vietnam's GDP is forecast to surge from an estimated 2.6% in 2021 to 7.5% this year. But it warned of risks, including growth slowdown or stagflation in its main export markets and continued disruption of global supply chains. Back here in the country, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council said Super Typhoon Karding has damaged some 58,944 houses in the 5 regions after battering Luzon last week. Of this number, 51,600 are classified as partially damaged, while 7,344 are categorized as totally damaged. Infrastructure damage was estimated at 304 million pesos in Ilocos region, Cagayan Valley, Mimaropa, Bicol, and the CAR. Agriculture damage was placed at 3.05 billion pesos in Ilocos region, Cagayan Valley, Central Luzon, Calabarzon, Bicol, and Cordillera. The number of deaths remained at 12, with 5 missing and 52 injured. The majority of these casualties are still undergoing verification as of this time. 12 Chinese sailors have died, 9 others are critically ill after a suspected case of food poisoning on board their vessel near Vietnam's southern Condau Island. Take a look. 11 other sailors were brought to hospital in an aircraft hired by the vessel's owner. 2 died on the way, while 9 are being cared for by Vietnamese medics on land. The Chinese-registered Wuzhou 8 cargo vessel was on its way from Thailand to China when 21 crew members fell ill. The cause of the death was yet to be confirmed. On Thursday, meanwhile, 7 bodies were found floating off Vietnam's southern Phu Quoc Island. They were believed to be from a boat that sank off Cambodia's coast last week, with 41 Chinese people on board. The vessel with 41 Chinese people on board got into difficulties near the Cambodian casino hub of Sihanoukville last week. It was carrying migrants from China who had been promised work. 30 people were rescued in Cambodian and Vietnamese waters, while 3 of the migrants were found dead. The report said 2 bodies were found with Chinese identity cards, and their decomposing state is also quite consistent with the time when the boat wreck occurred a week ago in the Cambodian Sea, not far from Phu Quoc. The chances of today's global food access crisis becoming one of food availability tomorrow remains a real threat without urgent action from the world's wealthiest nations, the Food and Agriculture Agency said. FAO Chief Koo Dong-yu made the appeal to agriculture ministers from the world's 20 strongest economies who are meeting under the G20 banner in Bali. Take a look.
Conflict, slowdown and a downturn because of COVID-19 and the climate crisis are the major drivers and our crisis today and tomorrow. So without peace, we will not achieve the zero hunger and the sustainable development goals. Food prices were very high for consumers and input prices are very high for farmers. Much needs to be done to ensure that all people can afford safe, nutritious food in sufficient quantity to meet their daily needs and preference and have a healthy life. We must increase the resilience of the global agri-food systems. It is paramount to increase the innovation, identify the alternatives, invest in infrastructure.
Mr. Koo said that the UN-backed Black Sea Grain Initiative had provided an important step forward in promoting exports from Russia and Ukraine despite the war. But the agreement needs to be complemented to improve the food access of most vulnerable countries, pointing to his agency's food import financing facility proposal, which is now being coordinated by the International Monetary Fund. The idea of the financing facility is to provide funds to 62 lower-income food importing countries that are home to almost 1.8 billion people to meet their most urgent needs. The World Economic Forum, or WEF, community of chief economists said it expects reduced growth and stubbornly high inflation to continue in the remainder of this year and 2023, while real wages will keep falling. In the WEF Forum's quarterly chief economist outlook, 7 out of 10 consider the global recession to be at least somewhat likely.
The chief economist's outlook is the views of 50 of the top chief economists from various sectors, various geographies, telling us where the global economy is headed. We do this exercise every few months. The last time we did this was in May 2022, and the headline was that we are in the midst of a perfect storm. Now, here in September, we're looking at a situation that became worse, and the outlook has darkened. So, for example, this time, 70% of our respondents believe that the global economy is headed for a recession within the course of 2022 or sometime in 2023. Inflation is expected to remain very high, although the outlook is better than it was in May. Real wages, unsurprisingly, will continue to fall and are expected to not keep pace with this rise in prices. Around 9 in 10 expect real wages to decline in low-income economies and 8 in 10 in developing economies. Food and energy crises continue to remain very large risks, and unsurprisingly, social unrest is expected to continue to rise as the cost of living continues to bite some of the lowest income across developing and developed economy populations.
So are we heading in for a recession? The likelihood is yes, that, given how the slowdown is transpiring, I think we are heading in for a slowdown. Now, how severe that slowdown is and how much of it you want to label as a recession, I think it depends. But this is supply shock. And that's something we have to keep in mind. The global environment is where it is today because of the war and the impact on supply, because of COVID lockdowns and the impact on supply, and because of the pandemic, and supply was still trying to recover from there.
As the high cost of living reverberates around the world, the economists agree that wages will fail to keep pace with surging prices this year and next. 9 in 10 economists expect real wages to decline in low-income economies, 80% in high-income economies during that period. And stocks drifted in Asia today as investors await key U.S. jobs data. While girding themselves for a corporate earnings season, many fear will highlight the impact of surging inflation and interest rates. Take a look. A report showing prices rose in the Eurozone at a record pace last month added concerns that central bank tightening has a long way to go, while Federal Reserve Vice Chair Lyle Brainard said U.S. officials would not pull back too early. Banks' battle against inflation could also be made harder as OPEC and other oil producers consider a major output cut owing to a plunge in prices caused by demand worries. Traders are also keeping an eye on developments in Britain as the ruling Conservatives hold their annual conference a week after new Finance Minister Kwasi Kwarteng shocked markets with a massive borrowing-dependent, tax-cutting mini-budget. All 3 main indexes on Wall Street ended down again on Friday, registering a third straight quarter of losses for the first time since the global financial crisis in 2009. Asian markets fluctuated at the start of the week. Hong Kong dipped along with Sydney, Singapore, Taipei, Jakarta, and Wellington. Tokyo rose, however, even as the Bank of Japan's Tankan survey showed confidence fell among the country's largest manufacturers for the third straight quarter. Manila also rose. Malaysia's aviation safety rating with the U.S. has been upgraded, according to an official, enabling airlines based in the Southeast Asian country to open new U.S. routes. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration downgraded Malaysia in 2019 for failing to meet international standards. A demoted country's carriers cannot expand services to the U.S., with airlines flying existing routes there placed under heightened surveillance, according to the FAA. Malaysian Transport Minister Wee Ka Siong said authorities appointed new heads and reformed its civil aviation regulator soon after the downgrade. Wee said FAA officials reassessed Malaysia in 2021 and again in mid-July this year, leading to the upgrade. With the barriers gone, Wee said it was up to the airlines to open new routes. Low-cost carrier Air Asia lauded the news, saying it would create more opportunities for expansion to the U.S. and other countries. And finally, in our news, U.S. President Joe Biden sent his gratitude to the Filipino-American community in celebration of Filipino-American History Month, or FAHM, this October. On Sunday, Biden said that he and the First Lady, Jill, are proud to recognize FAHM, take a look, and celebrate the innumerable contributions and rich heritage of Filipino Americans across the U.S. Take a look. Now, he said, we support, honor, and thank you for all you have done to help fulfill the promise of America for all of us. President Biden said on Twitter and Facebook. The statement was consistent with President Biden's statement last year. With a recorded presence in the continental U.S. as far back as October 1587, Filipino Americans have served our nation, defended our democracy, and fought for the promise of a more just and inclusive America, Biden said then. And then he recalled the contributions of the Filipino Americans in World War II and the catalyzation of permanent changes that improved the farm labor conditions in the U.S. President Biden similarly acknowledged the service and sacrifices of Filipino Americans frontliners in the COVID-19 pandemic, saying they are an essential part of the strength and diversity of the U.S. The Filipino American National Historical Society, or FANHS, themed FAHM this year as, quote, celebrating our history and legacies, 50 years of Filipino-American studies, 40 years of the Filipino-American National Historical Society, and 30 years of Filipino-American History Month. FAHM was first proposed in 1991, while the U.S. Congress made the official declaration in November 2009, citing the advancement of Filipino Americans and as a time to renew efforts toward the examination of history and culture in order to provide an opportunity for all people and the U.S. to learn more about Filipino Americans and their historic contributions to the nation. As my usual habit on the program, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. Stay in the news. Thank you for joining us here on ASEAN in Focus. As I say, always stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.